Hello and welcome to Book Yaps with Ash. If you're coming over here from Instagram, I want to say thanks for joining me over on YouTube. My hopes is that I could be to others what my favorite booktubers are to me, and that is a place to stop the scrolling and really sit down, relax, maybe grab a drink, coffee, tea, water, whatever you need, and listen to someone tell you about books they've read. So if you're a new subscriber who came from Instagram, thank you for coming over and subscribing. I'm really hoping to do some longer form videos over on here. But yeah, I'm hoping to use my YouTube channel to chat about books. For my first video about books over on YouTube, I decided to talk about 10 books that have kind of shaped me as a reader. Books that have brought me to where I am today, and the books I like today, and the books I don't like today. So that's this video. Let's get into it. The first book was published 17 years ago, and it is really one of the first ones I remember reading that had an impact on me, and that is The Hunger Games. I don't know if I read this exactly when it came out in 2008. I was 11, but I do remember reading it some point between when it came out and high school. I remember just loving this series. I feel like it was maybe my intro to more adult books as a tween. When I was in grade 9, in English class, we got to read this book and then go see the movie when it came out. And that was the most excited I had been about a book in English class. And I think it was a really good intro to me thinking more about books, symbolism, plots, characters, storylines, deeper meanings, the fact that it could be political. Reading this in English class for the second time and really diving into the names of the characters, the reason for certain things happening, the symbolism in the book. I thought it was all really, really cool. And I think that doing that and talking about it made me more interested in thinking deeper about books I read throughout the rest of my life. This is a series, obviously, that has stuck with a lot of people. It has stuck with me. I reread this book at the end of 2023. Still holds up. It's great. And oh my God, I have not been excited for a book the way I'm excited for Sunrise on the Reaping, which is coming out in March. Whatever I'm doing that day, doesn't matter because I'm going to be reading the new Hunger Games book. I always read as a kid, but I think this one made quite the difference in me wanting to continue reading, in the types of books that I like to read. And yeah. Hunger Games. Like I said, I read a lot as a kid, and in grade 11, I got a concussion. That kept me out of school for 3 months, and I really couldn't do anything stimulating, which is pretty much everything, if you have to think about it. I stopped reading as a hobby because I really wasn't allowed. And then I went to university where I had to read like 50 pages a week for each class, and I did not enjoy that. So reading for fun was not something that I wanted to do after doing all of that. Fast forward to 2019, I was working at Costco, and I was spending my break just scrolling through Instagram and seeing the same things that I saw during my last break or before I started my shift, and I didn't really care about any of it, and I thought, what a waste of time. Like, I already hate it here. This place sucks. Why not use my unpaid time for something a little bit more enjoyable? So I started reading again, which was tough because it's very hard to start reading again when everybody's talking around you, but it was a challenge I had for myself, and yes, I started bringing a book to work and just always having a book on the go the way I did when I was a kid. And one of the ones that really stuck with me and got me into horror is Bird Box by Josh Malerman. And this one's kind of making its rounds again. Up until, I read this book, I was pretty much like a solid thriller reader. I really only read thriller books. That was my thing. That was my genre. I found this one to be intriguing, so I thought I would dip into horror. And this one just really scared me. I think the concept of, the main character not being able to see and you reading it means that you can't see either. So you're only getting what she can experience through her other senses. So you don't know what these monsters look like. And I'm also kind of afraid of the dark. Fun fact about me. I am almost 30, but I'm afraid of the dark. And so I found this just to be very unique and very scary. Definitely recommend it if you haven't read it. Still in 2019, I was still working at Costco. I was in school and very busy and very tired all the time because I was doing those basically full-time each, and it was exhausting. So on top of all that, I thought, why don't I challenge myself? I love the It movies. I think I might like Stephen King as an author. Why don't I read the biggest book I've ever read? And so during the fall of 2019, while I was doing all that other stuff, I was carrying around this 10-pound book. Probably isn't 10 pounds. And I was reading it, and it took me about 3 months to finish this book, but I challenged myself to read a huge book so that I can, one, say that I can do it, that I can accomplish something like this, and two, because I loved the It movies so much. I thought that as horror, it was just really high quality, the characters were amazing, and I wanted to experience what the book was like, which is very different than the movies. There's also obviously so much more in this that you don't get in the movies. It's very dark. There's an orgy scene that I'm sure you've heard about, and if you haven't, look it up, I guess. But yeah, this was more than just reading, this story. This was a challenge for me. This was still recovering from that concussion, being like, I can focus on this, I can read it, I can understand it, and digest. I think it's like 1,300 pages or something stupid. 1,100 pages. And so yeah, it was a huge achievement for me, and honestly, I would really love to reread it now. But yeah, this one was a big one in motivating me to continue reading, one that helped me learn that I can take on harder challenges like this, and also just a fun, spooky, scary book with crazy characters. As I mentioned, I was very much into thriller when I got back into reading as an adult. Thriller and horror were kind of my main genres, and in early 2020, I read Lisa Jewell's book, The Family Upstairs, and this changed thrillers for me. Lisa Jewell's books are considered more psychological thrillers, and I found that this was so unique. It was so engaging. I think I read it in like 2 days or something, which was quick for me at the time. The characters were so interesting. It was so much more than plot, which is what a lot of thrillers that I was reading at the time were. So what this is about is a woman named Libby who was adopted, and when she turned 25 had kind of expected to find out who her parents really were, where she came from, and what she learned was that 25 years ago, she as a baby was discovered in this home next to 3 dead adults, and no one really knew what happened, how the people died, why there was a baby left with them, and the people who survived what was going on in that house, which was essentially a cult, come to kind of meet Libby now that she knows where she came from, and she gets the story of what happened in this house. Very unique, culty, as I said. I read this one twice now, and it still holds up. There's also a sequel that's very good, and yeah, this got me into Lisa Jewell for sure. I love her books, and I think what I do like actually is psychological thriller more than regular thriller. Okay, everybody, hydration break. In the spring of 2021, myself, Storm, and Laura decided to go and visit all of the little free libraries in the city. And we brought a bunch of books, traded them in, and brought home a bunch of new books. And this book that I've talked about a lot, The Midnight Library by Matt Haig, was one of the ones that we found in a book box. This is a picture of me and my cousin, by the way. I don't know why it's in this book. Anyways, so we found this book in one of the book boxes, and we were also intrigued by the plot of it. There's a library between life and death where you can pick a book and live a life of yours if you had made a different choice. That sounded so cool and so interesting. So, of course, we picked this one up. All 3 of us read it, and it just kind of changed all of us in a way, which feels like I'm saying that sounds so deep and ridiculous, but I had never read anything like this before, any concept like this, but I found Matt Haig's writing to be so comforting, to be so simple yet deep and meaningful. I thought that it was so creative and interesting, and by the end of it, I had this kind of new outlook on life that was like, hey, maybe don't dwell on the choices that you've made or the things that you didn't do, and appreciate the life that you have now. And that was kind of the moral of the story, and I recommend this one to pretty much everybody. I just love it. I know that some people love it, some people hate it. I love it. And obviously that experience with kind of discovering it amongst little free libraries in the city made it feel a bit more special to me. And that's why it's on this list. I gotta take this Heather's Picks sticker off. Heather doesn't even freaking read the books. I know she doesn't. The next one is kind of my first intro into nonfiction and memoirs. So prior to reading this book, I thought memoirs were really like biographies, which I found to be boring, like a book written about somebody by someone else. I thought all nonfiction was boring, and yeah, I just was not interested in it. And I can't really remember what made me interested in this book, who I heard talking about it, but it is Educated by Tara Westover. A pretty popular memoir. I think it's one of the memoirs that's like, oh, if you like memoir, you should read this one. And if you don't know what this book is about, it is about Tara Westover, who grew up in a Mormon? Were they Mormon? I think they're Mormon survivalist family. They don't believe in education. They don't believe in doctors. They live pretty much off the grid. The dad doesn't even believe in washing his hands. It's about her life growing up, experiencing some crazy things. Like the fact that people in her family were still alive after like being burned alive and not going to a doctor. Crazy. The story itself is insane that people live like that, and that she got out because she chose to become educated and go to school when she was 17. But also, it really teaches you to appreciate having access to education, which is something that a lot of people do not have. So we do take it for granted. But anyways, this was a great memoir. Very well written, crazy story. And if you are interested in memoirs, read it. Next, we have a young adult book called Felix Ever After by Kaysen Callender, who is a non-binary author. This was my first kind of experience of a book that features a queer main character. Not only that, but a queer main character who is non-binary, who has had top surgery, so I related a lot to the struggles of this person. But their story wasn't really based around, like fully around them being queer. It was more about them kind of discovering different corners of their queer identity. Like at the beginning of the story, you know, they already identify as gay, and they've had top surgery, but they're starting to come to terms with maybe being non-binary versus being trans. And, you know, it's not a story about, oh, I have to come out to my family and I'm so sad, or society's not going to accept me, which are important stories to tell. Just once you've read and consumed those so many times, like, you just don't want to anymore, especially being queer. Like, you want to experience queer joy. And this was my first time experiencing queer joy in a book. I've read so many more since then, but I just didn't really know it existed until I read this one, and so it made me feel really happy and warm inside. I immediately wanted to read it again for the first time. I have not read it since, actually. I think it's a really good one for teens to read, obviously being young adult, and yeah, it just made me feel happy, and that's why it's on the list. Next, we have A Little Life. This is one that I will not recommend to people because it's so absolutely devastatingly sad. For me, this book was important to have during a time where I was going through some hard stuff. My life was exhausting, and I would often escape that exhaustion by running a bath, putting on some jazz, lighting a candle, and reading this really sad book. Which maybe doesn't make sense to a lot of people. It doesn't really make sense to me, but I spent about 3 weeks reading this book during that time, and it just felt like kind of an escape. It just felt special to be able to spend that long with these characters who felt so real. I think it was the first story I ever read where you're really getting a full lifetime with these characters, not just a snippet of it. And I realized I really love that in a book. So I think it starts when they're maybe in college, and it goes until they're in their 40s or 50s, and you're just with them their whole life. And I found that to be really special. Again, I think part of why this one feels important to me is, again, the circumstance under which I read it. But I do think that it, in some way, the sadness felt comforting to me. And maybe that's a bit messed up, but that's the truth. So yeah, that's A Little Life. Next one, we have Viola Davis's memoir, Finding Me. And the reason this is on the list is because this is the first audiobook that I ever listened to. I decided to try out audiobooks after I'd had my top surgery because I knew I'd be tired mentally, but wanted to try out listening while like doing something with my hands to see if it was something that would work for me. And I found listening to Viola tell her story was amazing. I think she won a Grammy or something for this audiobook because it was very, very good. And this sent me down a path of listening to plenty of other memoirs as audiobooks, and now listening to fiction, nonfiction, what have you, on audiobook. It's another way to read. It's a great way to do it when maybe you don't have the kind of eye strength or the mental focus at the time to sit down and read. I know, like, if I have a pretty bad migraine, it's nice to be able to just listen. It's great for when you're kind of doing mindless tasks, and this allowed me to read a lot more books in a year than I did previously because I also listen as well. So, and really, looking back, this was a great audiobook to start with. Really, really good. And lastly, a book I also talk about a lot these days, Project Hail Mary. This is one I read last year. This is the only one from last year that is on this list. And the reason I've added it as part of my kind of reading journey and what shaped me as a reader is because this is my intro to sci-fi. I was always a bit afraid of sci-fi. I thought maybe I might be too stupid for it. I thought maybe I wouldn't care about it. It might be a little too, like, nerdy. There might be too much world building for me to follow. I don't know. I had all these ideas about sci-fi and how I would feel about it and if I would like it. And this changed my mind. And I have read other sci-fi books since then, and I will continue reading sci-fi books because I think actually this is a genre for me and I love it. Yeah, I found this to be super cool. The science in it was complicated enough to feel real, but written in a way that makes you feel like you understand it and you're like figuring it out with the main character, which makes you feel smart. The creativity in this was incredible. The character dynamic was incredible. And yeah, I really loved this book. It's stuck with me since I read it in, I think, June. And so 6 months ago. And I hope to reread it one day, and I hope to continue on with sci-fi. So yeah, this was one that I think opened a lot of doors for me with what I will continue to read in the future. Are you still here? If you're still here, thank you. So that's it. Yeah, these are the books that have helped shape me as a reader. There are definitely more on this that I could add to this list, but I found that these were nice moments in time. Hate to be the one, but if you liked this video, like it and comment or something, and subscribe. And turn on notifications so that you know when I post new videos. Not sure how often I'm going to do this. Definitely a monthly book wrap thing still, but would love to do it a bit more. I have fun doing it. Hopefully at least 2 people have fun watching it. Then I don't feel like I'm talking totally to myself. But yeah, don't forget to drink your water today. And see you next time. This has been Book Yaps with Ash. Peace.